To not get stale, games often implement a system to... you know what? Screw this! One of the most dopamine-inducing feelings in video games is leveling up. But in my opinion, the best part of leveling up is the part where... let me see. Your last shot from a magazine deals increased damage. You get the full bonus with 12 or more magazine size. The bonus to... you read the title, shitty progression or whatever.
Fresh meat.
Diablo 3 holds a special place in my heart. It was my first game in the series. Of course, now I realize that 2 is just way better than 3. One of the reasons I think 2 is better than 3 is the amount of choice 2 allows you to make when you level up. Not only do you get a skill point you can put in one of 3 skill trees, but you also get 5 points to directly increase your stats. Pretty weird how my favorite part of the game is highly relevant to the topic of this video, huh? Unlike Diablo 2, Diablo 3 has you unlock skills at a predetermined level. That would mean that, for example, the Toucher class would always unlock the Ball Tickle skill at level 5. Okay, who the fuck wrote that in the script? For a more serious example, the Demon Hunter would always learn Rapid Fire at level 5, and then at level 8 it would be Smokescreen, and so on. And that's awesome at max level because you'd have every skill and you'd be able to switch build anytime. In fact, that's the best part about Diablo 3. It's so easy to just swap your skills at any given time, which promotes a lot of experimentation. Another way that Diablo 3 differs from 2 is that all the skills by default go in specific slots on the hotbar. Well, actually, if you turn on elective mode, you can choose any skill in any slot. In due time. Now, I just laid down all this cool info on how Diablo 3 is awesome. Now, let me tell you why it's dog shit. Like I said earlier, this is pretty cool because you get to change your build on the spot. But that's only cool when you're higher level. Because one of the big issues while you're leveling up is that if you don't like the particular skill or rune, it kind of feels like that level up was for nothing. Oh yeah, runes. I forgot about those. So instead of getting a new skill, sometimes leveling up gives you a rune instead. Every skill has runes that modifies the skill. Could be something as small as adding fire damage, or as big as adding rocket launchers to your crossbow sentries. Runes are a mixed bag. While I think it's a really cool system to give you more choice, I feel that a lot of runes are very boring, and it makes it feel even worse when you unlock a shitty rune on a skill you already don't enjoy using. Also, since you're forced to equip one skill of each category, I feel like it removes a lot of the choice that's really fun about the Diablo franchise. In the older games, and even Diablo 4, you can choose whatever slot on your hotbar you want. This is great because it gives you so much build possibility. Probably not Diablo 4. But what about elective mode? Well, it ain't on by default now, is it? You see, this game has a setting named elective mode. What it does is, allows you to put any skill on any slot on the hotbar. If there's this mode, then why am I complaining about not being able to put the skills in any slot? Because the setting is off by default. In all of my playthroughs of this game, I've only gotten a message about this feature once, and I had to look on Google to figure out how to turn it on. Listen, y'all, I get how Blizzard probably added this in like an update after players complained about the original way. No! This was at launch? I understand why this system was put in place, to make it easier for newer players to get to learn the game. But I feel like these new players aren't going to know about this setting and just keep playing the game with it off. Which is really unfortunate because this system genuinely makes the game more enjoyable. There's a bunch of skills in the same category that synergize really well together. I still think this game does a lot well, but in the end, to me it's still just a downgrade to Diablo 2. They made it simpler for more casual players, and seeing more people find enjoyment in that is awesome. Even though the old way isn't complicated at all, and just gives you more choice. But what if the sequel was more complicated? Okay, before I start this, I gotta say that I absolutely love Final Fantasy VIII. Hell, I like it better than 7. And that is in part because of the GF and junction system. So you know how in Final Fantasy VII, there's these funny summons that are just kind of like magic spells, but with like animations that take... A minute and 22 seconds. Yeah, the animations are pretty long. Well, in Final Fantasy VIII, the summons, or Guardian Forces as they're called, play a way more important role. Guardian Forces can level up and learn new abilities, and to use these abilities you need to junction the GFs to party members. Junction is just a fancy word for equip, by the way. The most important of these abilities is stat junctions. These allows the player to junction spells to stats to increase them. And some spells are better junctioned to certain stats. The easiest way to put it is, offensive stats like fire are better junctioned to more offensive stats like strength or magic. And more restorative spells like cure are better if junctioned to HP. Listen, just use your common sense, you should be able to figure it out. And that's it. I don't think I'm forgetting anything else, am I? Oh, that's right! The worst shit ever! So, in this game, spells are kind of consumable. The max you can have of any spell is 100. And it is very important to get the max amount of spells. You see, Magic Stat Junction is based on the amount of spells you have. This is really annoying for spellcasters, because you'll always hesitate to use junction spells, because you don't want your stats to go down. It just makes it so most of your spells just sit in your inventory picking up dust. And how do you get these spells, you might ask? To get spells, you can either find draw spots that give you a specific spell, or use the draw command to draw a few spells from enemies. The amount of spells you draw is based on your magic stat. This is really fun and exciting whenever you see a new enemy and see that one of the spells you can draw is a bunch of question marks, meaning it's a new, undiscovered spell. But when you need to stock a spell to 100 for junction, it can take forever. And every party member has their own magic stock, meaning you effectively have to draw 300 of that spell. And don't you fucking dare mention Triple Triad. I know you can use cards to cut down on grinding. Let me explain. You can play the card game Triple Triad, which is fun, don't get me wrong. Acquire cards that you can refine into items, which you can then refine into spells. But it comes with a cost. If you lose the game of Triple Triad, you could lose your good cards. But in the end, it's still the same. Triple Triad or not, you're still grinding. So pick your poison. Take forever to draw spells from enemies, or play the same NPC over and over hoping you get the card you want, with a chance of losing your best cards. You can also turn enemies into cards and get them that way if you don't like Triple Triad. Sure, I'll drink the pesticide over the rat poison. Going back to Junction itself, a big problem I have with it is that it makes the party kinda all the same. The only real thing that differentiates characters is their limit breaks. Final Fantasy VII had a similar problem because of materia, but since characters had many limit breaks and directly increasing stats was really more of an endgame thing, their roles in the party were more defined. For example, all of Aerith's limits either heals or buffs the party, and she has the highest starting magic out of any character, making her perfect equipped with some magic materia. Or Kate Sith's limit, slots, makes him great at being the member that stays the fuck out of my party. But in Final Fantasy VIII, party members only have one limit break that they can upgrade, and in 2 cases, their limit break is so bad that other characters are just better to use. Like, yeah, I could play as a melee attacker with Selphie, since your last weapon makes it so she never misses. But I could also just have the same junction set up on Irvine and have more damage thanks to his limit break. And it's really unfortunate because this game, on many occasions, switches your party because of story-related reasons. And instead of this being a fun way to experiment with different characters, it just becomes a game of, well, who am I gonna switch the junction setup to? And don't even get me started on the leveling mechanics. Let me talk about the level. So in Final Fantasy VIII, when you level up, the enemies level up alongside you. This was done to avoid long grinding sessions to get stronger like most other RPGs. Oh no. All you need to know about this system is that it encourages you to run away from battles and simply focus on your junction. Because if you increase your stats with junction without leveling up, you will do endgame damage to low health enemies. It's like if you went back to the first area of any other RPGs and destroyed everything. But in this case, it's like this the entire game. And this is the problem with Final Fantasy VIII's leveling mechanic. It doesn't fix anything. You either avoid it or ignore it. If there's one thing to be said about this system, is that it tried something new, and following one of the best video games of all time is hard. They could have just easily made another materia system, but they didn't, and that deserves credit. But what if we had a game that didn't? Yeah, that's it. It doesn't. That's it. It just doesn't. Is there a lore reason why this game is dog shit? Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is the dog shit piece of filth made by Rocksteady's festering carcass. It's a live service mess with looter shooter aspects. In the game, you do repetitive missions fighting stupidly designed enemies. Can you tell I don't like this game? When you level up, you get to put a skill point in a skill tree. Nothing weird here, it works like any other looter game. Until you realize you're forced to choose from one of the 3 skill trees, and the game cycles between the 3 when you level up. Meaning that, for example, at level 1 you'd be forced to pick from the left skill tree. And then, the next level would be the middle tree, and the level after that, the right tree. You'll always be forced to have equal amounts of skill points in all 3 skill trees, which comes with an issue. It makes the skill trees very unfocused. Typically, the purpose for having multiple skill trees is that they all have their own niches. Let me use Borderlands 2 as an example. Zero's skills in his red tree are based around melee, while the skills in the blue and green trees are based around guns, with the green tree having a lot of useful skills for sniper builds. Kill the Justice League has a similar system, but the skill trees contain a lot of random skills that don't really fit, and I'll explain why in a second. A personal nitpick I have with these skills is that they have a recommended playstyle, but that doesn't really tell the player anything about the skill. My best guess is that they represent what the skill trees are supposed to play like, because the colors match the 3 trees, but most of the time they don't represent the correct skill tree. Like Mrs. Freeze has her pink tree be about shields and being tanky, but in the blue tree there's a skill that gives you more shields at 30 combo, and the recommended playstyle is the purple tree for some reason. Unlike any other game with skill trees where you can always go back and select multiple skills in one row, in Suicide Squad you're forced to pick 1 per row. And listen, I know this game is different and I shouldn't criticize something because it's different from a game I like. But it doesn't matter anyways, cause these skills are shit! One of the most fun aspects of games with skill trees is looking through the skills at the bottom or top. It motivates you to keep going and makes you think about the potential builds and skill synergies you could do. But in Kill the Justice Leagues, most of these skills are honestly just boring, and they don't feel like they'd synergize well with other skills or even other pieces of gear. Even the capstones, the skills supposed to be the best and build defining, just feel like basic stat upgrades. And don't get me wrong, these later skills are better than the more early ones, but they aren't interesting. And they don't make you think, this is cool, I can't wait to unlock this skill. Another thing I don't like about this skill tree is that except the traversal attacks, the active skills are all the same across all the characters. Yes, every character gets a different effect from their suicide strike, but in the end it's all the same. It's an insta-kill moves that takes way too long for the value you get out of it. And the Squad Ultimate was cool at first, but when I realized all the characters have the same one, it really makes it lame because the time slowing effect doesn't even make sense if you consider the character's abilities. Only one I see making sense is Boomerang because he uses the Speed Force in this game. And even then, it's not really an engaging ability, it just makes the game trivial for like 30 seconds. But that doesn't even matter. Let me tell you a story. When I was recording gameplay and leveling up my characters, because Warner Bros. Games deleted all my data for this game, thank you very much, I had this theory about the skill tree. I thought to myself, these skills are so ass, I bet you don't even need to invest a single skill point into a character, and you would still be able to finish the story and do some endgame content, because loot was the only thing that mattered. So, when I unlocked Mrs. Freeze, I decided to not put any points into any skill. I performed the exact same way as a character with all skill points assigned. Like, yeah, it was a bit harder and I died a bit more, I guess, but in a game like this, the end games are not only a test of your skills, they're also a test of your build making abilities. Here's what I mean. This is a comparison between a true thought out build versus me mashing shit on my keyboard in the skill tree menu in another game. See how I literally cannot kill anything when I don't have an optimized build? These endgame challenges are meant to be the biggest test of your class knowledge. Or the build guide you saw online because you're a cheeky cheater that doesn't play the game right. Now, here's Suicide Squad side by side. Yeah, there's not much of a difference in the time to kill enemies. But you know what else I discovered? Loot progression is fucked as well! So we established this game as a looter shooter, right? Looter games encourage you to get new gear by giving levels to the gear as well. This makes it so you can't always use the same weapons or armor, because at one point it'll drop off and not be as effective as current level piece of gear. This is the core of most loot based games. Suicide Squad doesn't do this, which could sound good on paper. If you like a piece of gear, you'll always be able to use it. But the problem is that because of this, you aren't very much rewarded for experimentation. So a lot of times you'll only use the cool high rarity guns that are based on famous DC villains. And these guns based on DC villains are cool, but I mean seriously, what gun do you want? The gun based on Scarecrow that has cool ass effects and is really strong? Or the legendary that doesn't do that much? Now, to be fair, the legendaries are still useful and work really well in some builds, and in general this issue is only at Endgame. But if you wanted to, you could just use the same gun for your entire story playthrough, especially since the game gives you legendaries very early on. And that's the thing, right? These rarities, they're kinda useless. In all other looter games, including Suicide Squad, you usually start by only getting the more common weapon rarities, and as you level up, you start to get rarer and rarer items. And if you're really lucky, or you know the game well, sometimes you could get a legendary in early game, and it's awesome, you get to use a cool unique weapon. But as you move through the game, at one point that legendary will eventually drop off, and not be as useful as the current level purple, blue, or even green rarity. Well, in Suicide Squad, that doesn't happen because guns don't have levels. So as soon as you get the more unique weapons, switching back to the lower rarities is useless because you now have a gear that is always going to be better than all the other rarities, making all of these really pointless. But now let's talk about Suicide Squad's interesting endgame. When you beat the story, you unlock incursions, which are just missions you did in the story. But now it's slightly harder on a different map and there's a timer. I mean, normally endgames in looter games are similar to this. Dungeons in Diablo, raid bosses in Borderlands, raids in Destiny, raids and duties in WoW and Final Fantasy XIV. Just doing stuff you did in the main story, but harder. But the problem with Suicide Squad is the variety. Most seasons have at most 5 to 6 incursions to complete on repeat. And while the gameplay itself is fun, it gets very repetitive to redo the same challenges over and over and over again to only get the same loot you got before. But Obnoxious, you like farming in Borderlands, aren't you being hypocritical? Yes, this shameless strawman is the only way I know how to present a counter-argument. In Borderlands, farming is enjoyable because it's usually a quick 10 to 30 second kill to get a piece of gear and then you quit and redo it again. Also in Borderlands, farming a weapon rewards you with the weapon you're farming for, and it feels really rewarding to finally get the piece of gear after farming. The annoying and bad farms in Borderlands take very long. For example, any arms race specific gear in Borderlands 3 takes minimum 2 to 3 minutes, and at most 10 to 15 if you want to fully explore the map. But at least in BL3, the arms race weapons are awesome. But in Suicide Squad, you usually get the gear you need pretty quickly, making the whole grind for better gear just not as exciting. It also helps that unique weapons are just more interesting and fun to use in Borderlands, as a lot of legendaries drastically change the way you play the game. And there lies the issue. Suicide Squad makes you play 5 to 10 minutes incursions to get loot that, in the grand scheme of things, is just not that exciting. And sometimes you get a weapon your character can't even use. Because for some fuck-ass arbitrary reasons, each character can only use 3 of the 6 weapon types. Another mechanic the endgame has are mastery levels. Mastery levels are your typical special level that makes the game harder but gives you better rewards. Here's the caveat though, you only unlock them after beating the Brainiac of the season. And to get to the Brainiac fight, you need to reach rank whatever fucking number the wheel fell on when the devs were making this piece of shit. Anyways, grinding for season rank is a chore. You basically have to replay the same incursions over and over again. But what boggles my mind is that mastery levels makes the ranking up grind less of a chore, because you get more XP. But you only unlock it after grinding the ranks. And when you do unlock them, the season ranks become practically useless, and making it faster to grind is now useless. The way the mastery levels work is that when you beat Brainiac, you can increase your mastery level up to 5. And when you beat an incursion on a mastery level, you unlock the next level for that incursion. That's how it works in most games, so what's the problem? There's 200 mastery levels! Wow, 200 different difficulties? How awesome is that? Except there's 200 mastery levels because the levels barely change anything.
But obnoxious, what about—
Shut the fuck up! Seriously, from level 1 to 15, there was barely any differences. And I stopped at 15 because every 10th level, the game tells you that you need to level up every other incursion's mastery and beat the awful Brainiac fight to unlock the next 10 levels. This is one of the most dreadful grinds I've ever seen, and it's not like the rewards are even that good. Getting a duplicate weapon means almost nothing because you could just reroll item bonuses you would want a duplicate for, and it costs nothing to do so. Even if you have an optimized build, all mastery level 200 gameplay I found was people spamming the time slow ability. Wow, so engaging, fighting floating enemies that don't fight back. Listen, endgames like these aren't for everyone. Fuck, I know this one isn't for me. But I just feel like this system is useless. Unless you grind for hours, you don't experience anything different than you already experienced in the story, aside from the expanded loot pools. You know, that super engaging loot that totally changes how you play the game. So let me recap the problems with this game. We have a restrictive and unorganized skill tree that in the grand scheme of things, doesn't even affect your character that much. A loot rarity system that becomes practically redundant as soon as you get a single higher rarity piece of gear, and an endgame scaling mechanic that asks you to complete repetitive missions with difficulty that barely changes anything until hours of grinding, and gives you bonuses that become practically useless as soon as you unlock the system. This game in its entirety just feels like wasted potential, and as someone who's hyped for this game, I'm truly sad it turned out like this. I still love when any game has a leveling mechanic. It feels so good to start as some tiny weak piece of shit and end up as a world ender. And I'm probably gonna talk about some good systems at one point. Anyways, that's it. Eat shit and die, bitch.